Good day, Deep and Word family. Welcome to day 264 of our Bible study review. Today we're opening up a new book, the book of Esther, and we're going through the chapters 1 through 4. The overall theme of this book is Elohim's providential care over his people while they're in the diaspora. This is the southern kingdom of Judah before they return back to their land. And just to backtrack a little bit, because I know it's been a while since we were there in those studies, but Nebuchadnezzar took the southern kingdom of Judah into Babylonian exile. But the Babylonian Empire was overthrown by the Medes and the Persians. So now we're seeing this kingdom in power over all of the world of the ancient world, and we see that the Jews are still under their power. Let's open up in chapter 1 and read verses 1 through 5 just to get the setting of where we are in the story taking place. So it says, now in the days of Ahasuerus, right? I know that's a complicated name, but that's the best way that I know how to pronounce it. He's also called Xerxes. It says, who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces in those days. The palace where King Ahasuerus sat on the royal throne of his kingdom in Susa. In the 3rd year of his reign, he prepared a feast for all of his officials and his servants. So the army commanders of Persia and Media, the nobles and the officials of the provinces were before him. Verse 4, he unveiled the riches of his glorious kingdom and costly luxury of his greatness for many days, 180 days. That's exactly 6 months. In the ancient days, a year was 360 days, not 365. And so for 6 months, he's having this luxurious feast. Imagine how costly that is, but he's trying to show off the fact that that's nothing to him. All right. And so it says, when these days were completed, the king prepared a 7-day feast for all of the people present, from the greatest to the least in the citadel of Susa. So after 180 days, he wants to have another feast for 7 days. This is getting out of hand. And so not only did the king have his feast, but Queen Vashti also wanted to hold a feast for the women of the royal house during this 7-day feast. But during this time, the king was, yes, very drunk off of the wine. And so he sent for his men to go send for Queen Vashti because he wanted to unveil her beauty. Now, many think that he wanted her to strip naked and dance. And so this word got back to the queen and she refused. She was like, I'm not doing that and I'm not going. The word got back to the king and he was enraged. Now, mind you, he's having this large feast and there are other kings and princes among him. And so the word gets back that the king summons to his queen and she disregards his command. And so they're talking amongst each other and they're like, what shall we do for this matter? And one of his eunuchs say to him, not only has Queen Vashti, disrespected you, but this may inspire other women now to disregard the words of their husbands. But all around in this kingdom, if this gets out to the rest of the kingdom, that the queen does not adhere to your word, what would this make the people do as well? So the king is surrounded by the council of other kings, other princes, and his eunuchs. And so a suggestion is made to him. Let's read about it in verse 19. It says, if it pleases the king, let a royal decree be sent by him, and let it be written in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it may not be altered, that Vashti could never enter into the presence of the king again, and that the king will give her royal position to another woman who is better than she. Let's keep reading in verse 20. When the king's decree that he shall make is proclaimed throughout all of his empire, for it is vast, then all of the wives shall give honor to their husbands, both prominent and lowly. They wanted to establish order and keep it that way, because if Queen Vashti got away with this, then truly the kingdom would be in an uproar. So let's read the conclusion of the matter in verses 21 and 22. It says, the suggestion pleased the king and the princes, so that the king did according to the word of Memucan, which was one of his eunuchs. And it says, he sent the letters to all of the king's provinces and the script in every province in every language of every people group, bearing the message in the languages of his people, that each man should rule over his own house. Now, as we walk into chapter 2, we need to know that Queen Vashti, she's banished from the land at this point. And so there's more suggestions made to the king so that he can seek out a new queen. And so let's read about it. It says, "So the king's servants who attended him said, 'Let beautiful young virgins be sought out for the king. Let the king appoint officers in all of the provinces of his kingdom so that they may gather all of the beautiful young virgins to the citadel of Susa.'" Pause. He is over 127 provinces. And so they're going to go and seek out every virgin that they possibly can and bring them against their will into the citadel. Now, for some, if they were poor, they wanted this because they wanted to get out of their circumstances to have a chance of becoming the queen. And even if they did not become the queen, they would become a concubine. They would no longer be in those circumstances. So this wasn't a terrible thing for all of the women. And so all of these young women, these virgins, these maidens, were to be gathered from all of these provinces, 127 of them, to go through this process of purification for a full year before they ever set foot in front of the king. And they would do so under Haggai, one of the king's eunuchs. Now we walk into the main characters of the story, Mordecai and Hadassah. Hadassah is her Hebrew name, but she has to hide her identity, and so she is named Esther in this story. So now in verse 5, we see in the citadel of Susa, there was a certain Jew named Mordecai, but he's actually a Benjamite. But again, the southern kingdom of Judah consisted of Levites, those from the tribe of Benjamin, and those from the tribe of Judah. But altogether, they just called themselves Jews because they were the only tribes left in the Judean land. So they all just called themselves Jews. Now, Mordecai was the guardian of Hadassah, aka Esther. Now, this was Mordecai's uncle's daughter, but they both passed away. Her mother and her father passed away, so he is acting as her guardian. So Hadassah's gorgeous. She's beautiful, and she is taken away. She's taken away from Mordecai, and he tells her before she is taken away, "Do not disclose the fact that you are a Jew. Do not tell them your real name. Tell them your name is Esther." It's a Babylonian name. Esther is closely related with Ishtar. Ishtar is closely related to the Babylonian customs that many Americans have unknowingly put into their worship. Now let's go to verse 11. It says, "Every day Mordecai walked around the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther fared and what might be done with her." He is acting as a father. He's been caring for her, so he's very concerned about her. And so the turn came for each of the young women to go to the king after being 12 months under the regulations for the women, since this was the regular period of their beautifying, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 months with spices and ointments. And so, yes, the truth of the matter is, all of these young virgins would no longer be virgins because they were to go into the king's chamber and to please him, so to speak. Now, they were not to go in front of him or inquire of him. They would not see him again unless he sent for them. So they would forever become concubines. And so at this point, now it's time for Esther to come in and do what she has to do. And so we see that she actually gains favor from the king. Let's read about this favor in verse 17. It says, "The king loved Esther more than any other woman because she had gained grace and favor in his sight, more than all of the other virgins. So he sat the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. The king held a great feast for all of his officials and servants. It was a great feast for Esther. He remitted his provinces from paying tax and gifts according to the royal generosity." Some time has passed, and Mordecai is sitting outside of the king's gate, and he hears two of the king's eunuchs plotting and conspiring to attack the king. Mordecai hears of this. He makes it known to Esther, the new queen, and Esther brings this matter to the king, and those two eunuchs are dealt with. Now let's walk into chapter 3. It says, "After these things, the king praised Haman and set his seat above all of the officials who poor with him. All of the king's servants, when they were at the king's gate, bowed or paid homage to Haman, since the king had commanded it. Mordecai, however, never bowed or paid homage. Never. So Mordecai was always, positioned outside of the king's gate. And everyone else, when they saw Haman riding on his, horse, everyone would bow before him. And so it was very obvious to this man that was like, I'll bow to no one except Yahuwah. The king's servants tried to reason with Mordecai on behalf of his own life that please bow before you see this man. And he's like, I really don't care. I'm never going to do that. And so the king's officials make it known to Haman, who I guess is the right-hand man of the king, that this man is actually a Jew. So Haman is enraged and he goes out, right, to seek to kill all of the Jews. This is the spirit of Satan working in the flesh. So we see in verse 7, and the first month, which is called Nisan. Now, mind you, this is not a Hebrew setting. This is a Babylonian setting. And so in the Babylonian year, it's called Nisan. And it says the 12th year of the king's reign. They cast pur, which means lots. Now, many of the Jews, celebrate this feast of Purim because that's what casting lots meant. As we continue to read, we know that Haman was casting lots all throughout the year for the Jews to be destroyed. But what happens eventually is that the lots that he casts for the Jews is casted upon his own head. So they cast these lots for 12 months in a row. And it says right here in verse 8, then Haman said to the king, there exists a scattered people dispersed among the other peoples in all of the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all others, and they are not complying with the king's laws. So there may not be a suitable reason for the king to allow them to exist. Again, this is Satan working in man. This is no different from the story of Daniel, how Daniel would only adhere to the laws of his one true Elohim, and he did not care about the laws of the land. And so we see the same spirit working in this setting. Let's go to verse 9. It says, if it pleases the king, may it be written that they are to be destroyed, and may there be 10,000 talents of silver deposited into the king's treasuries, so that I may distribute it to the hands of those doing the work. And so just think about it. The king just had a queen that was disobedient and she was banished from the land. And now there's this report of these people that don't adhere to his laws as well. So in the king's mind, he's like, all right, cool, get rid of them because, we have to establish order in this kingdom. So the king agrees to have this decree to be put out, and he uses his signet ring, which is a maker's mark. So this decree goes out in all of the provinces, and there is a certain day that in one day, all of the Jews shall be persecuted. And it doesn't matter whether it was a woman, a child, elderly, they are to be wiped out of the land. So in chapter 4, we see that Mordecai hears of this, royal decree that goes out, and he is at the king's gate and he's in sackcloth. He's crying. And so Esther wants to know what he's crying about. And so she sends one of her officials, to go back and forth as a liaison. And so he goes out to Mordecai. Mordecai tells him, and he goes back to Esther, and Esther hears of this and she starts grieving. So you would think immediately that the new queen would have favor to be able to enter into the king's court and tell him of this matter. But see, the law of the land is you do not go into the king's presence unless he calls for you, unless he summons you. And so the truth of this is made known to Mordecai, and then he comes back to her with a response. These are the words of Mordecai. He says, do not think that in the king's palace you will be more likely to escape than all of the other Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, protection and deliverance for all of the Jews will be ordained from some other place, but you and your father's house shall be destroyed. And who knows if you may have attained this royal position for such a time as this. He's essentially telling her, you've been placed in this position for a reason, to protect your own people. And he says, don't think that you're safe in the palace. What if the king finds out? What if it's found out that you're a Jew? You will be destroyed too. Let's finish out the chapter with verses 15 through 17. Then Esther replied, sending back to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Jews who can be found in Susa, then fast for me. Stop eating and drinking for 3 days, day or night. And I and my young women will fast likewise. Only then will I dare go into the king's presence, since according to the law it is not allowed." And she says, "If then I perish, then I perish." So Mordecai went away and did exactly as Esther had commanded him. What can we gather from this story, and how does this relate to us? See, you were born for such a time as this. You also have been given a royal decree by the king to share the gospel, make disciples, and bring them in to the kingdom. You are seated in high places in Christ. Christ in the Spirit is at the right hand of the Father, and he's counting on us to be his hands and feet to save, right? To administer and to help to save as many people as possible. I hope you see the same story kind of playing out. You also have a royal position in the kingdom, and you were born for such a time as this. Please make no mistake, our King is arriving very soon. Please do exactly what he has called you to do. We are co-heirs on a co-mission with the King. Deep and Word family, that's all that I have for you today. Until tomorrow, Yah bless.